Hey, y'all, it's Brandon Adams, the host of Dawg Nation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Before we begin Dawg Nation Daily today, I want to remind you and say thank you for the great response so far to our Dawg Nation appreciation. Tickets on sale right now. DawgNation.com, the place you can go. There's a link right there on the homepage for that. You can get in. And don't forget, we still have some premium tickets left, which include autograph opportunities with either Nick Chubb or Sony Michel or Roquan Smith. So if you want your autograph from one of these great former Georgia players, check out the Dawg Nation Appreciation tab there at DawgNation.com. You can get in on that. We've got a great show. It includes Jeff Sentell. It is going to be a lot of fun. I am really glad you're with us as Dawg Nation Daily begins right now.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is Dawg Nation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
So we're in a kind of weird time when it comes to the college football calendar. We're a couple weeks removed from National Signing Day, and we are still a couple of weeks away from the start of spring practice, at least for Georgia spring practice. Auburn spring practice starts really early this year, but nonetheless, we're still a couple of weeks away from the start of spring practice for the most part here. So we're kind of in kind of a weird time. Luckily here on Dawg Nation Daily, though, I'm kind of a weird guy, so I actually kind of enjoy this time of year. And I know that's kind of a strange thing to say, but I like the things that we get to talk about this time of year because there are occasionally some subjects that might pop up, around sort of late, February, early March that just during the regular college football calendar, you don't have much of a time to sort of address or much of a time to deal with. And you can sort of have some fun with some sort of off the beaten path topics here. I think an example of that here today on Dawg Nation Daily. And let me start with something that I know you're going to like. Let me go back in time to a few months ago. Kirby Smart chastising the media. Y'all always like to hear Kirby beat up on those of us who speak into microphones or, write columns for a living. You like hearing that. And a few months ago, Kirby Smart was kind of all over the media for at least the ones that attend practice every day because they hadn't noticed that Marc Webb, the former four-star wide receiver from the class of 2017, had been doing some work at defensive back. And Kirby had some fun at guys like me, our expense. Here is Kirby on that to set us up for a conversation today.
Let me say this first. I'm very disappointed in you guys because he's been there for 2 weeks. And I really don't know where you guys have been, so I've been a little bit shocked. I mean, we didn't try to hide it. We didn't move him around an individual. We didn't put him in a black jersey. I kept asking Claude, I said, what are these guys doing? And then it shocked me that y'all got it during the game, and it came by way of a roster announcement or something. We probably shouldn't even have done that, and y'all still would have known.
So you may be wondering why in the world I would start Dawg Nation Daily with that audio clip from Kirby Smart. The partial truth is y'all don't really need a reason to laugh and enjoy the idea of Kirby Smart kicking guys like me around a little bit, so you probably enjoy that just at face value. But the other reason why I played the clip of Kirby Smart talking about the Marc Webb position change from being coming out of high school as a very good wide receiver to being a defensive back, kind of helping Georgia's depth a bit there in 2017 is I actually had Marc Webb on my mind yesterday afternoon and yesterday evening a little bit. And the reason why I was thinking about Marc Webb is because of a tweet that I saw from a totally unrelated figure. The guy's name is Daniel Jeremiah, and he is I guess he's like a draft scout, but he's sort of like a media draft scout. Works at the NFL Network, has a podcast, been kind of doing this sort of NFL draft preparation stuff for years and years and years. And he put out a tweet yesterday that A, I completely agree with, and B, I think has some relevance for Georgia. If you're listening to us either on the radio on 960 The Ref or in podcast form, I'm going to read this to you. If you're on the video side of things, you can see this. Daniel Jeremiah at Move the Sticks on Twitter says, I always put this out there during this time of year for high school coaches and parents. If your kid excels at wide receiver and cornerback, push him to cornerback. Every year we evaluate 1 million wide receivers, and we try to look in the bushes to find extra cornerbacks. I think that is such an interesting thing from Daniel Jeremiah. I wasn't a player. I wasn't a coach. I don't have a scout's eye necessarily, but just from my own observation in football, what Daniel Jeremiah, an expert, suggests there, I think is pretty true here. That when it comes to sort of the glamour position, young prospects sort of gravitate towards the wide receiver spot. Maybe you have to be convinced to go play defensive back, but when it comes time to make money in the NFL, cornerbacks get paid. And elite ones that have spent their whole life working and developing there, they put themselves in a position to make themselves a lot of money in the future. And it's not just the NFL guys that kind of benefit from this, but as we talked about the other day, and we talked about Tyson Campbell here on Dawg Nation Daily, as Bill Conley's written at footballstudyhall.com, that defending passes is the hardest thing to create for a college football team each and every year. You can find rushing yards, you can find passing yards, you can even create some sacks and some run stopping. But knocking past balls out of the air is just a really hard thing to do unless you have really good players doing it. So for young athletes that want to make some money, slide over and play defensive back. For college teams trying to build themselves into a power, take some of your best athletes, also put them on the defensive back, especially at cornerback. You put yourself in a good position to do that. Which brings us back to the guy we just mentioned a moment ago, Marc Webb, who was coming out of high school, a great wide receiver out of Philadelphia, out of Pennsylvania, but moved over to defensive back during the 2017 season. And as Kirby Smart explained, a lot of this was about, at the time, Georgia just needed an extra body over there, needed some help at that position, and Webb was the kind of guy who could provide that. Here's Kirby again.
I don't think that at all. I'm not saying that at all because I like what I saw in Webb. I mean, Webb was one of the most talented freshman receivers we had, but we also, as far as I know, only have one senior receiver. And we've got three or four guys in the secondary that are seniors. So we're a year away from depletion at one spot and not the other. We're looking at this decision as a 3, 4, 5, 6 week, possibly 1 year decision that could pay off for us.
So let me clean up my description of that comment a little bit. I set it up the wrong way because I put them out of order. But that's Kirby Smart, basically saying this wasn't, the position change for Marc Webb was not about, him not being a good wide receiver. We think he could have been a very good wide receiver. This is about, this is about other things. This is about the fact that we think either in the short term or over the course of the long term, we think that Marc Webb can be a really good defensive back for Georgia. And as Daniel Jeremiah explained, if that's true, that could be good for Webb's NFL future. And as Bill Conley from footballstudyhall.com explained, it's also pretty good for teams looking to fill some holes at maybe sneakily one of the most important position groups in all of the sport, at least from the championship level, having really outstanding defensive backs. And being an outstanding defensive back, well, the whispers coming out of Georgia practices last year is that something that Marc Webb definitely has a chance to be. Jeff Sentell will join us for a live interview coming up in just a few minutes, but a couple of months ago when he was on DawgNation Daily, he had heard some of this stuff about Webb, and he was right there to praise Marc Webb as potentially a very good future Georgia defensive back, and the future for the Dogs could be 2018. Here's Jeff.
Georgia might feel they got a high 4-star or maybe even a 5-star at cornerback last year with how Marc Webb is playing right now for the Bulldogs as a converted wide receiver. I spoke to Marc Webb in the open locker room after the SEC championship. He kind of felt pretty cozy right now at cornerback. So that might be a situation there where Georgia doesn't really need to go shopping for 2 or 3 covered corners like maybe they thought they needed to heading into this class.
I think that's really interesting from Jeff, and I think it's an example of something that we're going to see from Georgia a lot in the years ahead. As this roster becomes deeper, when you get excited about, players for an upcoming season, for a very thin roster, a place like, say, Florida or Tennessee right now, they're sort of reaching out for hope that one of their 2018 guys is going to step in and be a savior. And obviously, at a place like Georgia, there is still some excitement about the incoming freshmen, those 2018 guys. That's just going to be natural. But as rosters get deeper, it's some of the 2017 guys, a year older now, who are actually going to step up and have a better chance to contribute. Maybe even some holdover talent from the 2016 class. We saw that some of Ben Cleveland last year. Marc Webb may be an example of that for Georgia in 2018. A guy who spent a year learning and, based on what he learned, is ready to contribute maybe in an interesting way in 2018 and maybe even beyond that. As rosters get deeper, it's the guys who are a year or two older who have a better chance of sort of breaking through and contributing. It just becomes a lot more difficult for an incoming freshman to be able to do that. And Webb could indeed be one of those guys because of the fact that he has been a bit of a bright spot at a position like that. Here's a little bit more from Kirby Smart talking about Webb and his role as potentially a defensive back.
We obviously have had concerns with injuries at that position, and we have a little more depth at wide receiver. He's been making plays on special teams, and he tackles people. He played corner in high school. It's not necessarily permanent, but he's done a really good job. I really think he's got a bright future there. We'll sit down and revisit it when the time comes to see what he really wants to do. I think he originally wanted to play receiver, but I've really never met a more selfless kid that said, "It don't matter, coach. I just want to play." And he's playing. I mean, he's playing on punt return. He's playing on kickoff coverage, kickoff return. So he's a valuable asset that we felt like that if AD didn't improve and get well, and Malcolm, we don't know when he's getting back for sure. Things look better and better with him, but we just didn't have enough guys. So we moved him over there, and to be honest with you, he's been a really pleasant surprise.
So that's Kirby Smart from back during the season, referencing an Aaron Davis injury, a Malcolm Parrish injury, And, he says in that clip, and this is kind of, for me, the bottom line of the whole discussion, he says, I'm not sure that the Marc Webb move to defensive back is going to be permanent, but I would suggest that maybe it should be. He calls Webb a selfless guy who will take the less glamorous position on defense at the expense of maybe playing in the more glamorous position of wide receiver. But as Daniel Jeremiah from the NFL Network lets us know, that's not necessarily a selfless decision. It's the kind of thing that if you really put the work in to learn and grow, could end up making yourself a whole lot of money at the NFL level. And a school like Georgia that allows guys to do that also benefits from that as well. Seemingly, you can find wide receivers, elite, lockdown, cover defensive backs in a day and age where you got 5 on the field at all times. That's a lot more difficult to find. And the school that's got the most is going to have the best chance of having great success on the field. And for Georgia, as it looks to upgrade its secondary in the years ahead, Marc Webb may be a candidate to help Georgia do just that. My name is Brandon Adams. This is Dawg Nation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We are glad you're with us today, whether you're watching us on Facebook Live at 10 a.m. on the Dawg Nation Facebook page, listening to us on the radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Rep. By the way, I had a chance to be on with David Johnston and Sam Frank on the morning show this morning on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Rep. I always love being on the radio in the Classic City, both for our show every day at noon and when I have a chance to hang out with the guys there. That's always a lot of fun. If you're anywhere near the Athens area, please check out 960 The Rep. It is just good sports talk. We talk Georgia football here each and every day. They do, a little bit more of the all sports coverage there for 960 The Rep, but they do a great job of it. We're really proud to be a part of their radio family there. And, of course, you can check us out in podcast form. It's an on-demand deal. You can listen anywhere in the world, any time of the day or night. You can start it, stop it, come back to it. It's just a really convenient way to listen to Dawg Nation daily. We try to make it easy for you to find. iTunes, SoundCloud. We post the show for you at the world-famous DawgNation.com. We're just really glad that you seek out Dawg Nation daily every day. Even during the off-season, we have some fun kind of kicking around some topics for how Georgia gets even better in 2018 and maybe takes that next step towards a national championship. It's going to be a fun next few weeks here on Dawg Nation Daily as we do a lot of that. And we are really excited. I mean, really excited. Over the moon excited about Thursday, March the 15th for our Dawg Nation appreciation. And I tell you, the response to this has been so gratifying, in terms of trying to make sure we have enough tickets available for those who want to be there for that. We have our general admission tickets that start at just $49. And, the event that night is going to be so much fun as our special guest, Nick Chubb, Sony Michel, Roquan Smith, really takes center stage that night. And, we'll be on the stage with him. It's going to be a big multimedia presentation as we kind of look back on the big moments of a season that Georgia fans will appreciate forever and ever and ever, a run to the college football playoff, an SEC championship. 3 of the guys at the center of that run for Georgia were Chubb, Michel, and Roquan Smith. They'll be telling sort of their behind-the-scenes stories there that night. The event, as I said, tickets start at just $49. We've got a lot of surprises we're going to be announcing about the Dawg Nation appreciation in the days ahead. You're going to want to go ahead and get your tickets for that right now while they are still out there, because once we announce everything that's going to be going on, the tickets are going to be scarfed up there pretty quickly. And by the way, speaking of Chubb, Michel, and Roquan, I know a lot of you acted quickly to get your VIP tickets for the autograph package. We still have some premium tickets left, though. And the thing you need to understand with the premium tickets, they do include an autograph from either Nick Chubb, Sony Michel, or Roquan Smith. So please make sure that if you want the autograph from one of those guys, that you get in there. Go to DawgNation.com. Just go right there to the homepage, DawgNation.com. There's a tab for you to get in there and get your Dawg Nation appreciation tickets. Easy for you to find if you just go to the website, DawgNation.com, and you can get in on the Dawg Nation appreciation, including our premium tickets with some autograph opportunities while they are still out there. And we're just really excited. Jeff Sentell is going to be there. All of our Dawg Nation staff is going to be there. We're looking forward to hanging out with you all as we just enjoy what was a terrific time in 2017 and another great opportunity for Dawg Nation to get together. By the way, speaking of Jeff Sentell, he'll be with us in a moment. We'll talk a lot of recruiting stuff with Jeff. Before we get to that, speaking of NFL draft stuff, I mentioned the tweet a moment ago from Daniel Jeremiah about, defensive backs being a great way to make it to the NFL and maybe young prospects thinking about that. Another guy from the NFL Network is kind of sort of spouted off here, and I think it's of some interest to Georgia fans. Peter Schrager is his name, and the NFL Network, I guess, kind of put this out there on Twitter. Schrager making the comparison between Sony Michel and a guy that really broke through in the NFL in a big way for 2017, which was Alvin Kamara, who maybe not used appropriately at Tennessee at times, but the New Orleans Saints, they got a lot out of Kamara this year. He was one of the sensational offensive stars as a rookie in the NFL. And what Peter Schrager says, at least what the NFL Network tweeted out that Schrager had said on TV is that Sony Michel reminds him a lot of Alvin Kamara, and he thinks that Sony Michel could be as high as a top 10 pick. Now, it's probably worth pointing out that a lot of the early mock drafts here have not had Michel necessarily as a first rounder. You see Isaiah Wynn in a lot of these mock drafts. You see Roquan Smith in in literally every single one of these mock drafts. So Georgia's going to have at least one first rounder, could have two with Isaiah Wynn, and Peter Schrager there from the NFL Network suggests that maybe Georgia gets a third. Ultimately, I don't really know how high Michel gets drafted, but I do think that his NFL future does have the potential of really benefiting Georgia in a pretty interesting way. I mean, after all, most college football fans would think of him as sort of the complement to Nick Chubb, who sort of is in maybe the starring role for more of the majority of his Georgia career. But Michel's sort of a versatile, dynamic running back. If he goes on to have great success at the NFL level, it becomes another selling point for what Georgia can kind of point to itself as running back U. Now, I don't know that the idea of being running back U or linebacker U or anything like that, I don't know how much that really wins with recruits, but it certainly doesn't hurt to be able to say, hey, look at the NFL success our program has had, especially at that running back position. It's kind of exciting to see Sony Michel's name mentioned in such elite company in terms of where he could be drafted here in 2018. It's good to have with us here on Dawg Nation Daily. Hope you enjoy Jeff Sentell right now. And I understand we're still a couple of minutes away from Jeff Sentell here on Dawg Nation Daily. Jeff is on assignment here right now today. This is one of those deals where, even post-signing day, it never slows down for Jeff Sentell. He's still got a lot going on. So we're going to catch up with Jeff in about 2 or 3 minutes. Is that right? About 2 or 3 minutes, we're going to catch up with Jeff Sentell. While we're waiting for Jeff, let's get ready to knock out some of your comments here. You can kind of weigh in on anything you want to. We'll do a little bonus content conversation. I'll also take a moment while I'm pulling the comments up here to remind you that we started something new on Dawg Nation Daily yesterday. The feedback that I've gotten here, it's not unanimous, but it is the majority or plurality, whatever the right word is, that most of you want to hear only football talk, either on the video show or on the podcast. And yet there is still a pocket of people who want to hear about other sports like basketball, baseball, which has just started, the Lady Dogs, which are having a great season, Gym Dogs, which are, obviously a heritage program for Georgia. So, how do you solve the problem of the people who want to hear some of that stuff, but also, satisfy the bulk of the audience that only wants football? Well, we're doing something brand new, which we call the Dawg Nation Daily Double. So if you want extra basketball talk, we're going to do that for you during the Dawg Nation Daily Double. If you want to hear about the Lady Dogs and their win last night at Ole Miss, that's for you on the Dawg Nation Daily Double. We're posting it right now at the forum.dawgnation.com. I'm also going to begin putting a link to it on our show page when I post the podcast at dawgnation.com. It's only about 5 or 6 minutes long. It's not a full podcast. It's just sort of an addendum to the regular podcast to give some coverage to the other UGA athletics programs and satisfy the need for those of you who want to hear that without sort of offending the sensibilities of people who think about this as being a Georgia football show. So not going to please everybody with that. Hopefully we're pleasing the majority of the audience. It's there for you coming up later on today at the forum.dawgnation.com. All right, let me hit a couple of the comments before we get Jeff Sentell here in a minute or two. Alan Verbanchik says, basketball is a sport. See, that's part of the reason why the basketball coverage is sort of partitioned off somewhere else now. Van Burt is the same thing. I wasn't aware that Georgia played sports other than football. See, that's another reason why we're doing it separately. Jennifer Stevenson Fleming says, is that going to be on Facebook Live? So for right now, this is audio only. It's a little bit like when we first started Dawg Nation Daily. For a year or almost 2 years, I guess it was about 2 years, Dawg Nation Daily didn't have any kind of video component either. And I'm not telling you we'll wait 2 years to put this on video, but we're at least going to have to wait a little while. This is still very much a work in progress because the problem is, I know a good bit about men's basketball and know a little bit about baseball. Most of these other sports, I don't really know that much about. So I'm also playing catch up on some of this too a little bit. And I don't mean to just, completely put that out there, but that is kind of the case. So this is all kind of a work in progress, and I don't know that we're quite ready for a video on that yet. Cheston Wainscott says they're good at equestrian and women's swimming. Yeah, we even actually talked, like the briefest second of swimming and diving on the Daily Double today. And if that doesn't make you want to listen, I'm not sure what will. But somebody had sort of mentioned that we forgot to say that on Monday after the SEC championships. And that's an example of stuff I just don't know. I had no idea that the swimming and diving championships were this past weekend. But we're going to try to cover some of that with the Daily Double. So you can check that out at the forum.dawgnation.com. For now, though, let's talk about something that I know you all like, and that's Jeff Sentell, a little UGA recruiting talk. It's good to have him and you with us on Dawg Nation Daily.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Always fun to have Jeff Sentell here on Dawg Nation Daily, and he's on assignment today, keeping it busy, even during this sort of, lull between the end of the 2018 cycle and the start of the 2019 cycle. And Jeff, I'll say good morning to you. Thanks for being with us. And I want to bring you in on a conversation we were having a few minutes ago before you joined us. You go back several months ago here in Dawg Nation Daily, you talked about the possibility of Marc Webb being really an outstanding defensive back at Georgia after most of us thought of him as a wide receiver coming up the 2017 class. Position changes like that can benefit the guys who change them, and adding a lot of talent to your defensive back coffers, probably good for Georgia overall. You still think Webb has the potential of being a dynamic player if he's to stick at the defensive back position?
Yeah, Brandon, I think Webb's a good example of Georgia recruiting a guy that can kind of do a lot of things. And he was rated as a 4-star receiver. I think he was right around number 20 nationally as a receiver. But he got there to a point when he got there right around maybe the Notre Dame game, he had to switch. And he'd been practicing at cornerback for a little bit. And he's just a guy, size, kind of that bulldog mentality, very physical player, doesn't shy away from any sort of competition or anything else like that. He was just a guy that, to me, he had adaptable skills. Obviously, he was a great wide receiver, and you started to, when you finally got to interact with him and his, how things were going at media day. He considers himself a corner. He thinks the path to play and help the team right away is quicker at cornerback, and he's really just wants to do whatever he can to help the team there. And when you're bringing in talented athletes like this, that's a good thing when somebody's thinking team first and not, I got to get mine and I got to think about the NFL draft. But in this case, Marc Webb would adapt to either role.
There is some chatter that Sony Michel may be moving up draft boards. That's a guy who was obviously a former elite recruit out of American Heritage High School that's been very good to Georgia. How much does it help the Dogs' future running back recruiting if a guy like Sony Michel goes on to not just have a good NFL career, but actually get drafted high enough to make himself some money coming out of college? That's a win-win for both Michel and Georgia, is it not?
Yeah, well, I think it will put to rest, Brandon. The main thing is the narrative out there when Georgia didn't have a really good draft class last year. When you start putting names like Roquan Smith and Sony Michel in the top 10, top 15, really, what is it, 10 Bulldogs were invited to the scouting combine this year. So that narrative about other schools that can use about Georgia and putting guys in the NFL, that one's not going to apply anymore.
Let's talk about the 2019 recruiting class here for a moment. I thought you had a really interesting piece at DawgNation.com where you kind of looked at the positions of need, maybe even attaching some numbers to that of how many guys Georgia might like to sign at those positions for 2019. You mentioned 3 wide receivers. We already know who 2 of those are going to be. Dominic Blaylock, Jaden Hazelwood, 2 outstanding commitments for Georgia for the class of 2019. But when you look at that potential 3rd receiver, and I want to be greedy here, is there a chance that Georgia could still add another elite wide receiver to join Blaylock and Hazelwood? There's been some online chatter about Frank Ladson lately, a guy from Florida. Deshaun Sheffield, we used to talk about a lot, haven't talked about him as much lately. A Sheffield, a Ladson, one of those top 10 level receivers. Could Georgia's 3rd receiver signee potentially be someone in that kind of top 10 category?
Well, it could be, but you got to remember, Georgia's going to recruit according to need, maybe not so much according to rankings, or at least Georgia's own kind of personal rankings right there. I think the new wide receivers coach will be beneficial in recruiting there as well. But that whole the whole needs thing, the needs analysis thing. When you talk about Georgia needing a big receiver, well, Tommy Bush is going to address that. Matt Landers is going to address that, and then everybody kind of forgets about Jaden Hazelwood, who's about 6'3.5", about 195 pounds. He's a guy, nation's #1 receiver, 5-star receiver. He's a guy that kind of fits that big physical receiver mold to a T. And then as we've reported a lot on Dawg Nation, Dominic Blaylock is no longer that quick, speedy slot guy that maybe he was initially portrayed to be. Dominic Blaylock's at least 6'2". He's right around 195 pounds, 190 pounds. He's another guy, even though he's highly rated with lots of quicks, he's another guy that's going to be one of the bigger receivers in the Georgia room when he gets there.
You also kind of wrote about the need for offensive tackles, and when I think about that for 2019, I just keep kind of bumping back into just how hard it is to find true elite offensive tackles. They're a lot like cornerbacks. Georgia thinks it met its need there with Tyson Campbell in 2018. But think about offensive tackles. I mean, even a guy that you wrote about the other day, Devontae Dobbs, who, much like Cade Mays, will be recruited as a tackle, but maybe projects as a sort of an elite guard at the college level. I mean, it's kind of funny. You know, Jeff, even of elite prospect offensive linemen, a lot of those guys end up playing guard more so than tackle. Finding a truly great tackle, the way that Andrew Thomas has turned out to be, for instance, that is still one of those really difficult things to do, even for an elite recruiting program like Georgia, is it not?
Yeah, and I think that's probably, if you look at Georgia, and it's funny, Brandon, I've seen and I've read a lot of projections, and everybody's starting to think, okay, this guy's the left tackle, this guy's the left guard, this guy's the right guard, this guy's the center, this guy's the right tackle. I mean, if we know anything about Sam Pittman, what he will do is he will try to play the best 5 offensive linemen at any time. And if you just look at it from a needs and numbers perspective, Georgia has a lot more guards in 2018 in the fall that look to be able to bust their way through and get on the field than they do tackle. I don't even know if, camp's going to show this out and practices are going to show this out, but I don't even know if we can sit there and say that, Ben Cleveland might be a 3-year starter at guard. Maybe he might get a look at tackle in the fall and looking at how the team performs right there. You got Cade Mays, who's going to do a great job. You've got Isaiah Wilson, who's going to do a great job. Those guys are going to have to compete just like any other position. And then maybe if you move a Cleveland and give him another look at tackle, then maybe you get freed up room for Justin Schaefer, Notori Johnson, Trey Hill, Jamari Salyer, all those guys that have the ability to play inside. Those guys, to just come back to the initial point, I think Sam Pittman's mission is to play the best 5 guys at any one position, get his best 5 offensive linemen out there in the starting unit, whatever they may be.
I agree with you on that, but kind of what it leads me to, though, Jeff, is when you think about recruiting at the national championship level, it's great to bring in a lot of really good athletes, fast ones, big ones, whatever else. But you do, at the national championship level, you got to do yourself some position-specific recruiting. You got to find true cornerbacks, not just defensive backs. You got to find yourself true offensive tackles, not just offensive linemen. You got to find defensive tackles. I mean, there are some position-specific recruiting things you have to do, right?
There are, but I had a fascinating discussion. This was at the media days. I was talking to Jonas Jennings, and we were talking about how Isaiah Wynn just gets it done. Now, Isaiah Wynn, and I'm probably partly to blame for this. Everybody probably thinks now that Georgia won't recruit a guy that's at tackle that's not 6'7" and 310 pounds anymore. Well, Isaiah Wynn is the counterpoint to that, because Isaiah Wynn was a very smart player, very intelligent player. He had it between the ears. He also had an incredible work ethic. I remember any time that Georgia held a camp, one of those Kirby Smart camps, even those Mark Richt camps, you always saw Isaiah Wynn as one of the first guys out there, ready to work with the young players, just ready to get better. And that's a guy that you look at Isaiah Wynn, a lot of people think he could be a great coach one day. But the main thing for him was length. He had that, wingtip to wingtip space, that span, kind of looked like a walking bookcase, I like to say. He's a guy that you had to get around, and he had the feet and the ability to play the position. And the postseason honors back that up, man, because he was an all-SEC tackle. He was a second-team All-American tackle on some perspectives. Pro Football Focus rated him very highly for what he did on the field. And even though his size is going to project him to play as an interior guard in the NFL, sometimes those molds, we can kind of make ourselves look foolish when we sit there and start thinking, well, he's not that big a guy. He can't do this or that. And, you brought up Devontae Dobbs. Well, Devontae Dobbs is the nation's #1 rated tackle this year. Probably going to visit Georgia on an official visit during the spring. Probably going to come in for an unofficial, maybe for G-Day. And then you've got a guy like him where he's only about 6'4", maybe about 295 pounds. So he's not a guy that fits the mold of that big prototype bookend left tackle anymore. But he's a guy that might even play wherever he goes to play in college. He might even play on the interior line as well.
We know you're busy. Couple quick questions. We'll let you get out of here. You wrote the piece about the misses for Georgia in the 2018 class. You kind of had some fun with, why you were doing that and, kind of where that, kind of came from. But I thought it was a fascinating read. And in thinking about Trevor Lawrence, the 5-star quarterback ends up at Clemson, at one point in time could have been at Georgia. How different does this Georgia class end up looking if Lawrence is the quarterback and not Justin Fields? Because there are a lot of guys who followed Fields to Georgia that would not be here had Trevor Lawrence, said yes to the Dogs at one point in time, right?
Yeah, that is very interesting how that would have shaped up, because you're really talking about the two titans of the recruiting class in 2018 when you're talking about Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields, and that's a pretty good what if episode, Brandon. If Trevor Lawrence, way back in December of 2016, commits to Georgia instead of Clemson, then there's no need to go down that alley for Fields. And gosh, does Fields wind up at Florida? Does he wind up at Texas A&M? I know that's an interesting thought for a lot of Bulldog fans out there. But, the main thing there is you got Justin, a guy that was a kind of a low-key G, down-low recruiter for the rest of the class, wanting to put guys together for Georgia. I don't know if Trevor Lawrence would have been the same guy. Maybe he would have. But the other thing was there were some players that went to Clemson that wanted to play with Trevor Lawrence as well. They did a great haul again with the receiver group they got. So I think maybe that would have been a plus-minus. Either way, if you end up with Clemson and Trevor Lawrence, and if you're Georgia and you end up with Justin Fields, those are good problems to have. And, yeah, that assignment was one of those that was kind of spread across the entire Cox Media Group bullpen of writers. And it was one of those where I kind of looked at it as I'm trying to go sell a Yeti to somebody on the Arctic Circle. But, I had a line in there where I used maybe like Tom Brady's overthrows in his love life, or the free agent starting pitchers the Braves weren't able to sign in the 1990s. That's what it kind of felt like going through that class and trying to look at misses for Georgia in 2018 with the greatest class in modern recruiting history for Georgia.
Well, Jeff, it's always fun to read everything you write there at DawgNation.com. You do a good job with all of that. We appreciate you being here today on Dawg Nation Daily. We know you're busy on the road here today, so we'll let you get back to it. And we'll look forward to speaking to you again here on Dawg Nation Daily again very soon.
All right, and hey, thanks, guys. And one little heads up PSA announcement. Intel blog dropped at 8 p.m. in the evenings now. We're going to try that one out for a while during the off season and see what folks think. Go to DawgNation.com, the message board forum.DawgNation.com. There's a thread there. Let us know how you think, whether you want your morning intel or you want your evening intel. And we'll try to do the best we can to accommodate what our audience really wants to see.
All right, good stuff, Jeff. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, guys.
And good things there from Jeff Sentell. I actually want to respond real quickly to a couple things that Jeff had to say, as that he is on assignment today. He's a little bit out there in the recruiting field just a bit, so we don't have as much time to be able to spend with Jeff here today, but he was good enough to join us here on Dawg Nation Daily. And he talks about the, the quote-unquote misses for Georgia in 2018. There obviously weren't very many, and you could make a case that there weren't any at all, based on the way that Georgia set records with the 5 stars that it signed and had the nation's #1 class. The only name for me, though, that comes up as a legitimate miss, ultimately, Trevor Lawrence. Georgia, I think, got the better quarterback with Justin Fields and the better overall recruiting class because of the guys who came to Georgia because of Fields. That actually ended up working better for Georgia getting Fields over Lawrence. But, that was a name that was out there a little bit. But the actual true miss, the one that Georgia did not add that I would have liked to have seen, was Robert Cooper, the top defensive tackle from the state of Georgia. That was a guy that, is gigantic, more than 350 pounds. He really sort of fits that John Atkins role potentially. That true nose guard who makes it a lot easier to play a 3-4 and a lot tougher on opposing offenses to run the football. Cooper ends up going to Florida State. Willie Taggart, all things being equal, actually had a pretty good class with the way things kind of closed out for him down there in Tallahassee. Cooper was a part of that. It's very hard to sort of, pick nits here and say that Georgia missed on anything. But if Georgia did miss with any name in its 2018 class, for me, Cooper may have been one of the ones that did that. Excuse me. Sorry about that. The other thing that came up from the conversation with Jeff Sentell a moment ago, that, you're talking about the idea of the offensive lineman and, the idea of finding those true tackles, those guys who are able to sort of play that position. And there is sort of a size spec you think of when it comes to the offensive line. And you say, well, a guy like Isaiah Wynn, as Jeff mentioned, sort of confounds that expectation. Wynn's not as big as the typical guys who play left tackle, but look how dominant Wynn was for Georgia in 2018. So therefore, maybe some of these specs aren't what they're all cracked up to be, that they're not the hard and fast rules that people like me and maybe some of the recruiting analysts sort of treat them as. The only problem with that, and obviously Jonas Jennings knows a lot more about this stuff than I do. Jeff was sort of, alluding to some quotes from him and what he just said there. While Isaiah Wynn was a great player and sort of a bit of a change up from what you expected that position, the problem is when guys like Isaiah Wynn are coming out of high school, you can't measure their desire, their want to, that makes them as good as they are. That's why we sort of lean on the 4- and 5-star guys. And you'll find diamonds in the rough occasionally, guys like Isaiah Wynn, but they're really hard to find and know who they're going to be coming out of high school. Always fun to have Jeff Sentell here on Dawg Nation Daily. We got plenty more of the program continuing right now as well.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Fun to have Jeff Sentell here on Dawg Nation Daily. And, of course, he is going to be with us for our Dawg Nation Appreciation, which comes up Thursday, March 15th. I've heard from so many of you who are making plans to be there as well. Many of you traveling in from kind of a long way away to be a part of that night. Tickets start at just $49. They are on sale right now. You can find the link at DawgNation.com right there on the main page. Nick Chubb's going to be there. Sony Michel is going to be there. Roquan Smith's going to be there. Some premium tickets still left that include autograph opportunities with one of these guys. Really, really fantastic stuff. A great show that night, kind of a multimedia presentation. Very special sponsor village. We're going to have a chance to have some giveaways. We've got a whole lot more giveaways we're going to be announcing. This is going to be an awesome, awesome event. It comes up Thursday, March 15th, Coca-Cola Roxy Theater, there at the brand new Battery Atlanta. Jeff Sentell is going to be a part of it. I'm looking forward to being there for it, too. SEC Through time, Mike Johnson back from Daytona. He'll be with us this afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern time for SEC Country Live. Looking forward to hanging out with him again. And some of the news that we'll be getting into today. We have talked the last few days about the various names that Alabama's been interviewing for its open defensive line coaching position. It looks like Alabama's now settled on a name, and it's not any of the people that we had mentioned previously. It looks like Saban, with a bit of a coup here, is going to bring in Craig Kuligowski, most recently at Miami, and Miami sacked the quarterback a bunch last season. But Kuligowski's real claim to fame was all the work that he had done there at Missouri for a long time with Michael Sam and Sheldon Richardson, and you can go on and on with the defensive linemen that have kind of come through Missouri, gone on to have huge college careers and make money in the NFL. They credit a lot of their success with Craig Kuligowski. So if the reports are true, and I think Bruce Feldman from SI had this first, that Kuligowski's leaving Miami to go to Alabama. That's a pretty big coup for Alabama to get a guy that's sort of respected as the best in the business when it comes to a coaching defensive lineman, at least among the best in the business. So maybe Alabama getting Craig Kuligowski here to coach his defensive line, that could be a kind of an interesting addition there for Nick Saban. Florida has made sort of an interesting declaration. They're getting ready to start spring practice here in a little while, and their first couple of practices are actually going to be open to the public. And this is kind of, I guess, a cool outreach method for a new coach, Dan Mullen, and a Florida fan base that probably needs to be both united and reignited. United in the fact that, listen, when you haven't been winning, and Florida at the highest level hasn't really been winning, there's probably some hurt feelings, some bitterness, and hey, how about, opening the doors, let folks kind of come in for a bit of an open house type thing there. Maybe that makes folks feel good about the program again. And you can also just sort of, have a good time with that. That's kind of an interesting choice. It's the exact opposite of what Georgia seems to do when it comes to things like this. And in this case, while I'm all for fans getting access to the program, and here on Dawg Nation Daily, I sort of argue for that kind of thing all the time, I'm not quite sure this is the right way to go about this. I mean, honestly, I sort of appreciate the fact, even if I think at times, Kirby Smart's certainly a lot more serious of a guy than I probably am, the sort of super serious tone he takes around his practices, treating them as almost like sacrosanct, I think there's something about that that's actually kind of cool, and I think it's really helped Georgia. I think that Georgia is where it is as a program because of how hard it works with its practices, and you only get so many of these things, and to sort of, turn a couple of them into sort of a dog and pony show open to fans, I'm not quite sure that's getting Florida where it needs to be by the end of the spring. Now, it also probably doesn't matter all that much in the long run here. But in terms of access and outreach to your fan base, if I was an SEC program, I'd like to try to find some ways to do that around the very limited number of spring practices that you're allowed. But Florida is doing this. I'm sure their fans will enjoy it, and I guess that is what it is all about. I talked a few moments ago about Sony Michel and how Michel, who could be climbing up draft boards right now, how that could help the perception of Georgia with the next generation of recruits. I wonder if the exact opposite could potentially be true for LSU when it comes to their embattled former pass rusher Arden Key, who had some comments recently, and we'll talk more about these on SEC Country Live this afternoon, about kind of his explanation for why things did not go well for him during his junior season, his final year there in Baton Rouge. He says he learned some lessons from this. From a productivity standpoint, it was not what it was supposed to be. He didn't go through spring practice last year. A lot of this stuff is sort of, mysterious, circumstances, but he's not the prospect now that he was a year ago. And while that's maybe troubling for him individually, could it be a problem for LSU collectively? This is one of those deals where Ed Orgeron's got to try to find some more pro prospects to kind of clean some of this kind of stuff. By the way, speaking of LSU, Grant Gunnell, we'll talk more about him on SEC Country Live today as well. A 4-star quarterback, very much considering the Tigers. That's a big recruiting battle to watch. We'll make that your SEC through. And as we get ready to close out our program here today, a couple reminders for you. First of all, I want you to check out the Dawg Nation Daily Double. We post it every single day. We're going to start by posting at the forum.dawgnation.com. Jeff mentioned the forum as well. I'll mention it too. Forum.dawgnation.com. You can find the Dawg Nation Daily Double. A little bonus audio content talking about some of the other sports we don't get a chance to talk to here on Dawg Nation Daily. Basketball, baseball, everything in between, a little golf. We'll do it all for you there at the Dawg Nation Daily Double. We'll put the link to the audio at the forum.dawgnation.com. Get your tickets for Dawg Nation Appreciation as well. Go to DawgNation.com. They start at just $49. Premium tickets still available, which include autograph opportunities from either Nick Chubb, Sony Michel, or Roquan Smith. They are our special guests for the evening. You're going to want to be a part of that. And we're thinking about Jacksonville. In October, our Gator Hater Countdown. Georgia wins again. 249 days from right now. Thanks for being with us on Dawg Nation Daily. We'll see you tomorrow. And for those of you with us right now, we'll look forward to speaking to you with some comments here, anything you kind of want to get into. We had some bonus comments a little earlier in the program. We'll squeeze in a few more here right now. We're glad you were with us. Wayne Folan, who lives in Pennsylvania, says, we talked yesterday about, places we'd like to see Georgia go, games we'd like to see Georgia play. Wayne lives in PA. He says, I want to see Dawg Nation Happy Valley so bad. Make it happen. That'd be a pretty fun destination. On my list of places that Georgia's not likely to play that would be fun to play, and let's face it, up until a couple of years ago, we would have thought Notre Dame was maybe an option that was unlikely to occur. Going to State College and playing Penn State, Beaver Stadium's a pretty cool spot, pretty cool venue. That'd be a pretty fun place to play. I'd love to go there. I'd love to go to Ohio State. Love to go to Michigan. Love to go to Texas. Back out west again would be pretty fun. Yeah, let's do that. Oh, Joy Stripling. What a disaster. What a disaster. Blind Eddie's not on the set. Would you do me a favor? Would you go get Eddie for me? Poor Eddie. What is going on here? I think, honestly, we're trying to do a lot of stuff, these days around Dawg Nation World Headquarters, and poor Eddie. I just left him off the set. James Crump mentioning that as well. We're going to get Eddie out here. My buddy Michael is going to make sure we get Eddie here. Tram Dickerson L says, thank you so much. Eddie, I apologize. Thank you, Michael. Y'all give Michael a hand. Eddie, I am very sorry. We just got busy today, and we left Eddie off the set. That's why I have to have – honestly, it's one of the main reasons why I need, commenters in the comment section, because there's no telling what I would forget to do if I didn't have, comment section folks kind of keeping me honest, including the Gator Hater Countdown itself. I mean, the truth is, I hate to sort of pull back the curtain here, but if you want to look at the, year and a half or so we've been doing the Gator Hater Countdown, we've probably forgotten to do it 3 or 4 times. And every time somebody will sort of, either, put in the comment section or on Twitter at Dawg Nation Daily, BA, you're falling down on your job. You forgot the Gator Hater Countdown today. And we'll go back and, we'll kind of correct ourselves. And last year, our math was actually incorrect. And the truth is, I think there's still a chance right now our math may be incorrect. It is weirdly sort of hard to count days, at least hard for me anyway. And somebody sort of had basically on their own double-checked the math on that, let us know that our countdown was incorrect, and we fixed it. So, yeah, y'all got to watch me to make sure Eddie's on the set. You got to watch me for all that kind of stuff. Stacy Goebel says, Eddie feels like Florida does in recruiting, just left out. Yeah, that's probably true. James Crump kind of making the comparison between Lamont Gilliard and Jamari Salyer. He says if Salyer learns the position, he's just better than Gilliard. I certainly would have, potentially made that argument, and I may still make that argument. But, man, Gilliard played so well in the SEC championship. At least the look was. A lot of that for me is based on replays and the mauling that I saw him doing to a lot of those guys during that SEC championship game. So, for me, Gilliard actually becomes a little bit harder to replace than I thought he would be, because I think this converted defensive lineman has sort of stepped in and become a pretty good offensive lineman here. One of those guys that you might not have been able to predict being able to do that. Let me hit a couple more of the comments that have kind of come in here recently. Alan Verbanchik says Salyer's elite. He's going to start. Very, very well may. Al Clement also had a kind of an interesting comment a minute ago about living in Gainesville. I didn't know he lived down there. Darian Ford's got a good idea. How about Eddie gets a small dry erase board for the Gator Hater Countdown? Yeah, I think that featuring him for the Gator Hater Countdown would be kind of a cool thing to do. And there's something about a dry erase board that I do kind of like. Now, we have the fancy graphic every single day that our buddy Hannah helps us take care of. But there is something about a dry erase board that I'd also kind of like there as well. Maybe Eddie could hold his little dry erase board. It's not a bad idea, actually. Matt Silver says, who is Georgia's toughest opponent for this upcoming season? I think it's pretty easy to look at two games head and shoulders above the rest. At LSU is tough for obvious reasons. That's just a very difficult road trip, one we're hopefully excited about taking here with a Dawg Nation, but a very, very tough road trip. And then the home game against Auburn, Georgia will benefit from being at home, but Auburn shows up in the top 5 of virtually all of these, analytics, FPI, Football Study Hall, S&P, all of these, elite analytics type blogs. They all rank Auburn in terms of a preseason projection, the top 5 for next season. That's still a very tough opponent for Georgia there. John Arena says, in terms, we mentioned briefly a moment ago about who would even really qualify as a miss for Georgia in the 2018 class. John Arena says KJ Henry was one that I would have loved to see the Dogs get, but we can't be too greedy. We loaded up on guys and gals. Yeah, that's well said by John there. And yeah, KJ Henry is a really good looking prospect. The kid from Pennsylvania would have been good too. I don't know why I'm blanking his name right now. But ultimately, are they really better than Quay Walker? Are they better than Channing Tindall? Are they better than Adam Anderson? Are they better than Brennan Cox? And in Cox's case, I'd say probably not for sure. But it becomes more of a matter of preference than an obviously better player. I think what Georgia did at its linebacker / pass rusher, recruiting was just a sight to behold. And certainly, I really liked KJ Henry a lot. But I don't know that he necessarily rates as better than the collection of guys that Georgia did bring in. Rhodey Williams says, how about a blackout game this fall? I don't really know why Georgia didn't wear the black uniforms last year. I don't know if just the seniors themselves decided not to do it. Actually, that may actually be a pretty good question to ask to Chubb and Michelle and Roquan during the Dawg Nation appreciation event. What was the deal with not wearing black jerseys? Is that something they sort of vocally said they did not want to do? Because I kept expecting Georgia to wear them at some point in time during the year. And, there were some reasons why not to wear them a couple times. You don't want to wear them too early in the season, maybe because, it can be hot. You don't want to wear them against a team that also wears black as a part of its, color scheme. Maybe that's, possibly true as well. You probably don't want to do it in anything that kind of looks like a motivational ploy. That's something that Georgia sort of shied away from in the past. Jeremy Pruitt just said at Tennessee they're not wearing the smoky gray uniforms anymore. Maybe Pruitt and Smart are kind of cut from the same cloth, and maybe Smart, even though he lets the recruits always wear them when they take their photographs, maybe he just doesn't like the black jerseys. I really don't know quite what the backstory is on that, but that may be something worth asking about here. James Crump says, who do you think could lose their starting spot to a true freshman? I mean, James, wasn't it you that was talking about the offensive line before? If I had to think about offensive linemen who could slide in and start, that may be one of those spots. Or, maybe, a projected starter at the outside linebacker position could be potentially, affected by an Adam Anderson or a Brenton Cox, maybe. Those are the sort of the names that kind of come to mind for me first on that. Jarvis Hanna says, who's the impact player on offense and defense this season? My impact player on offense is going to be Terry Godwin, and on defense, it's going to be Nate McBride. Jarvis McBride is one of those really popular names. When you think about Georgia's need for new linebackers to step up, McBride's a name that we hear often. I do think last season, Monty Rice benefited in comparison with McBride in two fronts. Rice went through spring practice. McBride did not. Rice was sort of physically built to be more of a run stopper. It's probably easier to play as a freshman as a run stopping inside linebacker than it is, in other regards. And, every time we bring up McBride on the show, this comment section lights up because he is a very, very popular player. And I think a lot of folks would join you in sort of agreeing that McBride's going to get his chance here in 2018. I'd say that probably too. I think your name of Terry Godwin's also really interesting. Godwin was a guy that, if you want to go back to the beginning of the Kirby Smart era, the regime, he was probably not fully in Smart's favor there a bit. He probably had to learn to embrace the physical side of playing wide receiver at a place like Georgia now that Kirby Smart's the head coach and Jim Chaney and James Coley and those guys are running the offense. And by all intents and purposes, it seems like Godwin has truly embraced all of that, has become a better receiver in the process. And I think one of the things that's sort of interesting and bodes well for Godwin's success this upcoming season is the fact that he got a lot of credit for teaching the position to McCole Hardman. Well, you're not in a position to teach unless you are, a master of those skills yourselves, and that seems to be what Terry Godwin kind of is right now. So a big year from Godwin. I think that's a pretty good suggestion there as well. Randy Hall says I should forget Robert Cooper. That's fine. You're right about that. I mean, I'm not looking to make the whole show about Robert Cooper or anything like that, but if the subject of who did Georgia miss on come up, if that subject is going to come up, Cooper is the name I'm going to mention there. Thanks, Dennis. I don't know why I was blanking on Micah Parsons' name a moment ago, but yeah, Micah Parsons was the big pass rusher from out of Pennsylvania who, flirted with Georgia, I guess, at one point in time. Certainly took the visit to Georgia, but Parsons was one of those guys. You have a few of them every recruiting cycle where it's just really hard to figure them out. I think that, these guys just sort of pop up from time to time. And Parsons was one of those guys. It's like wherever the dice sort of lands on the last is where he's going to end up going. And, I don't know how, real it was with George and Parsons, but I think a lot of the recruiting industry is sort of leaning in to find out, what Parsons was going to do because he was thought to maybe be a bit of an unpredictable recruiting figure. Tram Dickerson L says Kirby loves domination. He expects no less. He can be up 65-0. He still yells at the kids. You got to love him for that. Yeah, listen, he is an intense figure, and that's making Georgia better. There's no doubt about that. How about this great prediction from Randy Hall? This is the kind of thing I love about our comment section when somebody really puts themselves out there with a bold prediction. He says Jordan Davis, the young man from Mallard Creek that Georgia brought in for the class of 2018, is going to be better than Robert Cooper over the next 4 years. Well, there you go. That's a pretty strong prediction from Randy. I like that. Chad Clark says the black jerseys are cursed. I know a lot of Georgia fans going to feel that way. Graham Nicholson says not about uniforms, just play football and get the W. I do get that, Graham, but this is also one of those things that a lot of fans are just sort of authentically interested in. And, the uniforms, the logos, the kind of sort of paraphernalia around college football, that's a big part of the process for a lot of people. Darian Ford says, I want to black out Auburn. I tell you what I want to do. I want to crank that Soulja Boy song so loud at the end of the game against Auburn this November. Hopefully Georgia's winning. You know how like like in the Big Ten, the teams play for like the old Oaken Bucket and, like the Paul Bunyan's axe. There's a lot of those sort of old trophies in the Big Ten. Maybe Georgia and Auburn have a new sort of like tradition now of the winning team gets to dance to Superman Soulja Boy on the field after the game. Obviously, Auburn did that to mock Georgia in November, going all the way back to 2007, back when the song was popular, when Georgia did that in the blackout game of 2007. You better believe that if Georgia is beating up on Auburn this November, and I'm not even like a hip-hop guy, but I want to hear that Soulja Boy song. I want to hear that Superman thing cranking up in Sanford Stadium just as a way of, I don't know, I just think that would be appropriate given what Auburn did a year ago. Miriam Martin Corbin has a good idea. How about a party before or after G-Day? Take over a restaurant. We can get reservations from our group. Yeah, Miriam, we're going to try to do a lot of things like that this season. G-Day may be included. I don't have all the details on G-Day. Frankly, we got to get through Dawg Nation Appreciation first, and that'll give us about a month or so to kind of get ready for G-Day there as well. But we're going to try to do a lot of, really fun things like that this upcoming season down there in Athens. And a lot of y'all who say we need to be doing more in Athens anyway. So G-Day is going to give us a really good chance to do that. Let me hit a few more here. Shelton Tucker says, who wins the quarterback position, Justin Fields or Jake Fromm? Cannot wait to see Fields debut at G-Day, but this is Jake Fromm's job, I believe. I think that Fields is too good of a player not to play. I think Georgia's going to be in a good position this season, which it may be enjoying comfortable enough leads late in games that you actually get some extended playing time for Fields, which will benefit him in the long run. But Fields is too good not to play. Fromm is probably too good to lose his job as the starter. I am still Team Fromm, ultimately, when it comes to that. James Crump says, I think we're sleeping on J.J. Holloman. That could very well be true. I'm actually really excited about seeing Holloman this year. Another one of those, we talked about Marc Webb earlier, another one of those 2017 guys that could break out this season. Chachi Butler, and I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Chachi, says, do you think Fields is going to have a special package at quarterback this year? I think that if you can't get him enough playing time as a traditional backup, then you'll probably have to give him some special packages because he's just too good not to play some. Tia Willingham says Matt Landers is going to be a breakout player. I know he's one of those guys, big, tall receiver, cut from that Tommy Bush mold, who did get a lot of praise for how he worked as a scout team receiver a year ago, kind of emulating the other team's best receiver a lot and at times making things challenging on the Georgia defense. So Landers is a breakout guy. That's also a pretty good thought. Mike Massey mentions Elijah Holyfield. I think the early portion of the season is going to be incredibly important for Holyfield. Before Zamir White's healthy, and we don't know when White's going to be healthy. We don't know if it's going to be at all during 2018. My guess is it will be for part of 2018. I think we can all say with certainty it won't be the beginning of 2018, though. And so at that time, then, who is the complementary back to DeAndre Swift? We can probably all guess that Swift gets the most carries. Who's in number 2 position? Who gets the second most? A guy like Elijah Holyfield could have a great season if he maximizes that opportunity early in the year. I think he's good enough to do it. I know he's a big-time fan favorite, justifiably so. And, yeah, we could see a big breakout from Holyfield this season. Matthew McGahee likes my idea of the Soldier Boy. Yeah, that should become just a tradition where the winning side in the Deep South oldest rivalry just plays that song every single year. Wayne Folan, who lives in Pennsylvania, says, we talked about Penn State a little earlier, that the whiteout at Beaver Stadium is pretty awesome. It really is. That's one of the great visuals in the sport. That whiteout in that stadium, when everybody sort of participates in it, that's a pretty cool thing. Jason Glossier, in defense of the black uniform, says all of our uniforms have been dealt a loss at some point. Jason, that's a fair point to bring up. Jennifer Stevenson Fleming says would be awesome to beat Florida 45-0. Jennifer, I think that's a fair point. Jeff gives me a hard time for being a little too greedy at times. One of the things that I was just sick about back in October, and listen, 42-7 was a blast, don't get me wrong. But when Georgia had a chance to shut Florida out, had not happened since, 1987, something along those lines. Oh, I wanted to be the team to do that to Florida, or see Georgia be the team to do that to Florida. I really wanted that. And they came close. They came close. All right. Alan Verbanchik also mentioning James Cook. That's a good name to mention. Joy Stripling says, how about Georgia 100-0 over Florida? Yeah, the last Georgia team to go to the Rose Bowl before this season, the 1942 team, they actually hold the record for largest margin of victory against Florida. Wasn't it like 76-0? Am I right about that? Repeating that again sometime soon would be a lot of fun. Eric Allen says those black uniforms weren't too cursed when we got all those number 1 recruits to come to Athens because they wore those during their picture. Erica, that's a pretty good point there. Al Clements says, do you think Kirby Smart's going to play a dual threat quarterback? Yeah, I don't think he has any hesitation about doing that. I think that's one of the reasons why he wanted Fields, in particular because of his sort of dual threat ability. Alan Verbanchik says, will Natrez Patrick play in game 1? This is just an opinion, but if I had to guess, I'd say he probably will. That's my prediction on that, but that is just a prediction. Joshua Sanders, Robert Beal is a breakout player. That's not a name we mention a whole lot there. That's another one of those red shirt guys from 2017 getting his first chance in 2018. That's a lot of fun. All right, so we are late. We got to get ready to get out of here. Thank you all for the comments. Really appreciate that. If you missed a portion of our regular broadcast, we'll have Dawg Nation Daily up for you on iTunes, SoundCloud. I'll post the show at the world-famous DawgNation.com. If you want to check out our brand new Dawg Nation Daily Double, where we talk about, okay, here's what I get into on the Daily Double today. Kind of an outside-the-box name to potentially consider as Georgia basketball coach were the Dogs to decide to move on from Mark Fox. I kind of throw a hat into the ring here, and many of you may think it's dumb, but you can check it out through the Daily Double as someone to kind of consider there in that regard. SEC Country Live, 3 p.m. Eastern Time this afternoon on the SEC Country Facebook page, and hope to see you for our Dawg Nation Appreciation, which comes up on Thursday, March 15th. Going to be a lot of fun. Get your tickets. Just go to DawgNation.com. Look at the tab right there on the homepage. You can click into the link and get those tickets there. Can't wait to see you there for that. Y'all have a great day. I'll be back tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for another episode of Dawg Nation Daily Live.